For the millions of European Jews, 1939, the year that darkness befell Europe, was the beginning of a seemingly interminable period of terror. Sparked by Hitler's violent anti-Semitic rhetoric, the treatment of Europe's Jewish population turned from prejudice into hostility. Jews were deported to concentration camps where they were reduced to bare human conditions, left to die. In such an age of darkness and villainy, during the urgency and disparity of this mass genocide, heroes, people who risked everything to save those who were frantically in search of aid, were few and far between. And sadly, most of those rescuers have been lost to history. Such was the case for one Swiss diplomat stationed in Hungary, a hero in the truest sense of the word, who defied orders from both the Nazis and the Swiss government, worked in the shadows to deliver life-saving documents, and orchestrated an extensive rescue operation utilizing creative communication skills to secure the freedom of over 62,000 Hungarian Jews. A hidden hero. A daring diplomat. Carl Lutz. On November 20th, 1940, Hungary abandoned its neutrality and joined the Axis powers to gain back the territories they lost during World War I. However, after Germany's defeat at Stalingrad and other battles in which Hungary lost tens of thousands of its soldiers, Regent Miklos Horthy sought to leave the alliance. On March 19, 1944, in the attempt to keep Hungary loyal by force, German troops invaded the country. Accompanying German occupation forces was SS henchman Adolf Eichmann, whose sole objective was to implement the final solution in Hungary. Additional anti-Jewish decrees were passed, properties and businesses were confiscated, and Jews were stuffed into desolate ghettos where they were then deported to concentration camps. Throughout this entire atrocity, 568,000 Hungarian Jews perished, but the numbers would have been much higher if not for Carl Lutz.
The heroes were people who said, "This is not happening. Not on my watch. I'm not doing this. I'm not just going to sit there and just because my government says don't issue too many visas to the Jews, don't help them because it could draw the displeasure of Nazi Germany. So just try to look the other way." And then you have people like Carl Lutz. And Carl Lutz says this is not happening. And he starts saving lives. And this makes him a hero.
Carl Lutz was born on March 30th, 1895 in Walsenhausen, Switzerland to a deeply religious family. At 18, he immigrated to the United States. Interested in becoming a pastor, Lutz began classes at the Central Wesleyan College in Warrenton, Missouri, but soon realized that was not the right path for him. In 1920, Lutz joined the Swiss legation of Washington and began studying diplomacy at George Washington University. 6 years later, he served as the chancellor of the Swiss consulate in Philadelphia and St. Louis. By 1935, Lutz was appointed Swiss vice consul to the consulate of Haifa, Palestine. Here, Lutz used his diplomatic position to negotiate for the release of German prisoners, which became a great advantage for him in his later rescue missions. Beginning in January 1942, Lutz was appointed chief of the Department of Foreign Interests of the Swiss legation in Budapest. With the arrival of Adolf Eichmann, anti-Semitic laws ravaged the country. Deeply committed to helping Jews in Hungary, Lutz used the simplest form of communication available, his voice, to negotiate for permission to issue Schutzbriefs or Swiss-protected documents to Hungarian Jews. After being denied clearance to issue Schutzbriefs by both SS assault leader Adolf Eichmann and SS commander Heinrich Himmler, Lutz was forced to negotiate with Adolf Hitler, the Führer. Hitler approved of Lutz's request, as Germany remained always grateful to Lutz for having defended their interests so well in Palestine. On May 26, 1944, Lutz was granted authorization to issue Schutzbriefs to 8,000 units. By purposely misinterpreting the 8,000 units not as persons but as families, Lutz issued tens of thousands of additional documents. To deceive the Nazis, he numbered the real and forged Schutzbriefs from 1 to 8,000 and then back to 1 again. This cleverness saved thousands from deportations and labor camps, but sometimes the Nazis denied the Schutzbriefs without reason.
The situation was chaotic. It was protected on one day, was not protected on another day. Even if you had a genuine Schutzpass, they may just tear it up and you don't have it anymore. So if you are lucky, you are saved with a fake passport. And if you are unlucky, you are lost even with a genuine passport.
Lutz's ruse was eventually discovered by the Arrow Cross. However, they were unable to arrest him as they needed the recognition of Switzerland and other neutral countries to have international legitimacy. Instead, the Arrow Cross forced Lutz to join the death march of Jews to the Austrian border to sort the real Schutzbriefs from the forged ones. In an interview with Lutz, he explains his experience of separating the documents. "I didn't check the letters too thoroughly. I didn't want to separate families. If a mother had a letter of protection but her daughter didn't, I said it was a real one. I didn't reveal too many fakes." During the death marches, Lutz once again saved numerous lives by using misapprehension to delude the Nazis. To rescue more individuals, Lutz also established 76 Swiss safe houses that were guarded by Jews disguised as German and Hungarian officials. By once again using miscommunication to deceive the Nazis, Lutz protected the thousands of Hungarians living in these apartments. However, despite being placed under diplomatic protection, the safe houses were occasionally raided by the Arrow Cross.
Gerhard Feine was the number 2 man at the German embassy who worked for Wessenmeier, and he was telling Carl Lutz about what the plans were. He was basically ratting them out. He was saying to Carl Lutz that the Nazis were planning to do raids on the Jewish protected houses.
Lutz's activities can by no means be attributed to the heroism of a single person, but rather to a collective effort. By corresponding with other organizations and individuals, Lutz found success in his rescue efforts. The American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee and the War Refugee Board funded Lutz. They enabled private agencies to send funds into enemy territory and licensed $20 million for the rescue missions of Jews. Not only was Carl Lutz funded by the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, but he also paid the organization $3,000 to cover the expenses of materials for those he sheltered in the safe houses. In Hungary, Lutz also worked closely with other neutral diplomats, such as Raoul Wallenberg from Sweden and Angela Rada from Vatican City. Wallenberg expanded upon Lutz's use of protective documents, and Rada brought together all of the neutral diplomats in Hungary and formed a collaborative plan to rescue Jews. These diplomats rented buildings and put their national insignias on them, placing them under diplomatic protection. Furthermore, Lutz worked closely with underground Zionist youth movements, which were groups of Jewish youth who rescued countless by smuggling them to safety and forging documents. Lutz and the underground forged police registration forms, birth and marriage certificates, and protection letters. In May of 1944, Lutz received the Auschwitz Protocol, an account of the mass slaughter of Jews in Auschwitz-Birkenau from Hungarian journalist Rezno Kastner. Afterward, he immediately passed it on to Jewish diplomat George Mandel Montello and his brother Joseph. At the time, the inhumanity of the Nazis was known to government officials but not to the public. In an interview with Lutz, he said, "The very fact that I was asked to hand a note by President Roosevelt to the regent threatening those who committed a crime to the Jewish population is proof enough that the condemnation of Jews was known by the Allies. But most of the press of Europe and overseas kept silent about the atrocities committed against the Jewish people." Directly after they received the report, George and Joseph Mandel Montello wrote a summary and released it to the public. From then, government officials began urging Regent Horthy to terminate the deportations, and on July 7, 1944, Horthy ordered a stop. By cooperating with other individuals to relay the Auschwitz Protocol to the public, Lutz disrupted Eichmann's deportation schedule, which saved thousands. In April of 1945, Lutz returned to Bern, Switzerland. Upon arrival, government officials reprimanded him for overstepping his authority, as he was granted permission to issue foreigners protective passports but not to identify them as Swiss documents. Ambassador Pittelu justified Lutz's actions by saying, "It was kind of a policy of don't ask, don't tell." Lutz never had to inform the Swiss about the details regarding his rescue missions, as they never questioned him. Due to a lack of communication, Lutz was able to carry out his rescue missions without obstruction.
He always said the laws of life are stronger than the regulations of the people.
For all its villains and victims, the history of the Holocaust also has its share of heroes. Among these individuals, one man, shunned by his own country, abandoned by foreign policy, and forgotten by society, put his life in the line and defied diplomacy to act for all of humanity. Because of his willingness to sacrifice himself for others, not only did thousands of individuals survive the Holocaust, but millions of descendants were given a chance to live. A man whose legacy has inspired us to do the right thing. A man who used the influence of communication and misinterpretation to his advantage. A man whose correspondence gave the Jews of Hungary a second chance. A righteous Gentile. Carl Lutz.